Welcome, Crater fans. This is a talk from Crater Remote Conf Mobile Edition. This talk focuses on building mobile apps using JavaScript. You can find out more information about upcoming Crater Remote Confs at conf.crater.io. Enjoy the talk. Welcome to day 2 of Crater Conf Mobile Edition. I am Josh Owens, and I just wanted to say a quick thank you to our sponsors. Thought I had that ready. So we had two sponsors. The first is Progress, and their team, their Telerik team, has recently put out something called Native Script. And so, if you're looking for something to build native apps with using TypeScript and Angular 2, you can do that with Native Script. So give that a check out, and we're actually going to hear a talk about that later too. So I'm kind of excited if Angular is your thing. And the other one is Raygun. So, if you're deploying to production, getting the code there is really only half the battle. The other half is making sure that it's stable and usable for your clients or your customers. And Raygun has a suite of tools for error monitoring and performance monitoring that you can check out. They're pretty awesome. So I'm excited for this next talk. We have John Pinkerton with us from NewSpring, and he's going to talk about how they've automated their deploy process from start to finish, and it gets their application that they're building all the way to like App Store submission. So welcome, John, and I'll let you take over from here.
Hey guys. All right, let me share my screen. You guys see that?
Yep.
All right, so today I want to talk to you about continuous Meteor app deploys. So specifically, what I'm talking about is using Meteor, Cordova, and the Meteor build tool to automate the process of building an iOS app, building an Android app, deploying to Galaxy, so getting your server onto Galaxy, deploying to Hockey, which if you're not familiar with Hockey is a way of distributing alpha and beta versions of your app. They support iOS, Android, and a bunch of other things actually too. And then as well as deploying to Testflight and the iTunes Store, and deploying to the Google Play Store. So the goal of all of this is to automate it so that you can kind of set it and forget it, and then you really only have to set up this process one time. So why would you want to do this? Maybe you only do a deploy to Testflight or to iTunes, every once in a while. Well, we didn't want to do that. So we have a saying at NewSpring. We didn't invent it. I Googled it, and a bunch of people have said this, like pretty much everybody said this, but we try to automate what's important. And the reason why we do that is because we support a lot of different sites and services. We're a relative compared to the amount of sites and services we support. We, are a relatively small team, I would say. We have a very large user base. So we want a predictable and automated build and deploy process for all of our sites and services. That way we can spend time actually adding value to our users. So building features, and supporting the different sites and services that we have. So how did we get here? Let's see. We were tasked towards the end of last year with building a new native app for NewSpring, and we the church currently has a kind of third-party app, so it's like an app as a service, which has served us really well because we experienced a large amount of growth and we didn't have the resources at the time to kind of do it right. So we used an app as a service and got kind of a lot of things out of the box, and that's worked well for us for a while. But we're really in a good place now, so we wanted to go back and rebuild this app and add all of the features that we want that will really add a lot more value. So another thing that we realized when we kind of started down this path was that we have a lot of stakeholders. There are a lot of people above me in the organization that are going to have an opinion and are going to have a say in the app and how it gets built and how it looks. So we decided that we wanted to be as transparent with them as possible, rather than just hey, we're building an app and come back in 6 months and we'll show you what we've done. So we set a goal of shipping one alpha build a week to all of our stakeholders, so that they could see the progress and how long it takes, and when we run into issues, why, and all of that. So that was our goal, was to ship one alpha build a week. We chose Meteor to build these apps. The Cordova process and the Meteor build tool, allowing us to target both iOS and Android from the same code base, was really attractive to us. Because like I mentioned, we kind of have a lot on our plates, and so this is a really great process for us. So after doing some research into all of this, here's what we discovered. This is what it looks like to. Oh, there we go. This is what it looks like for us to do a deploy of an alpha app. So you got to do the Meteor build. We've got to upload our tarball to S3. We've got to update ECS. So we're using the Amazon Container Service to deploy the server. So that's what steps 2 and 3 are there. And then obviously a lot of these involve waiting. So then in order to deploy the iOS app, you have to open Xcode. You have to do a bunch of things in there. Then to deploy the Android app, you have to open the Android app, you have to sign and align the Android app. So there's just a lot of steps involved, and they're very repetitive steps. So after we kind of did this for a while, here's what we found out. It takes us about 30 minutes to do all of those steps. So doing that one week, which was our goal, is not really that bad. Sacrificing 30 minutes, here or there is not really that big of a deal. But one thing we did learn was it requires the whole team to understand the process of doing this, because one of our goals is for everybody on the team, everybody working on the app, to be able to actually ship a build. And so in order for that to happen, they would have to understand how to do all of this. They would have to have all of the necessary credentials, and they'd have to have their machine set up, so have the Android SDK installed and all of that. So that's kind of a bummer. And this process is pretty tedious. So if you're doing it more than once a week, it gets old really fast trying to remember all of these things. So as we know, all things considered, that things are going to go wrong. And actually, I just lied to you, and 30 minutes is very generous. I was only able to do it in about 30 minutes after I practiced and really memorized, the whole process. So things are going to go wrong, and you guys may have run into some of these before. There's, certificate signing issues that happen. There's user error, like I mentioned. Just memorizing that whole process, you kind of have to do it in a specific order. You lose passwords, you forget how to Xcode. And so one of the biggest, one of the things that attracted me the most to automating the process was I don't want to open Xcode, and I don't have to now. And I'll show you that. But and then another thing that happens is forget to update some external dependency that your app relies on. For us, it's our GraphQL server. So if I'm working on updating our GraphQL endpoint, and I forget to do that, I forget to push it into production, then lots of things go wrong. So I'm here to tell you today that there's a better way, and that is launch. So we have developed internally a an app that we're calling Launch. It's just a command line node application to automate this process for us. And so we've got a bunch of different launch actions that you can use. So we have launch build. So this builds your app for iOS and Android, and it actually builds the server as well. And then we have launch Galaxy. So this automates the process of deploying your app to Galaxy. Then we have launch Hockey, which will distribute the iOS and Android versions of the app through Hockey. So it goes through the process of uploading it and, making sure all of your certs are right and all of that. It just does it. And so this works for both iOS and Android, and it depends on what platforms you have added to your Meteor project. So if you just have iOS, then it'll just try to do iOS. We have launch Testflight, and so this will upload the app to it builds the iOS app for production distribution, and then uploads it to Testflight so that you can distribute it through Testflight and then actually promote a build to the App Store if you want to. And then we have launch Play Store, which takes the Android build and uploads it to the Google Play Store. So what I'd like to do now is show you, let's see if I can jump back out of here. Let's see, got to share a different screen. Where is it? Here it is. All right, so what I'm going to show you now is this whole process working using a to-dos example. So this is the Meteor to-dos example. So I took that project and added in all of the launch tools. So you can see here, this is the launch to-dos example uploaded to Hockey. So you can see there's a bunch of different versions of the app that have been uploaded. These have all been uploaded using the launch tool, and it's all automated. And so here's the same project, the iOS build on Hockey. And so here you can see the same thing, a bunch of versions, all automated. Then here we have, this is the Google Play Store, and this is our launch to-dos example. And down here, you'll see there are a bunch of APKs that have been uploaded. Again, all automated. And then here's iTunes Connect. And this is the Testflight builds that we've been sending out for the launch to-dos project. And as you can see here, again, lots of different builds. These were all automated. So what I was planning on doing was showing you, I actually built another example, and this is just the boilerplate you get when you do like a Meteor create. So that's the launch basic example. And what I set up that project to do was to build an Android app and then deploy the server to Galaxy, and then upload the Android app to Hockey so that you can download it. And there's a public download link to download it. However, Travis, which is what we've been using to automate this process, that's our CI or CD. It's been a little slow to respond today, so I'm not going to show you that live, but I am going to show you an actual build that was run a couple days, or actually earlier today, in a little bit. So here is the launch basic example running on Meteor. So this is, like I said, just the Meteor boilerplate. So let me jump back. All right. So good question is, why would you want to use Launch? There are automation tools for iOS and Android that exist already. However, when we went about the process of trying to automate this, we found that there are some very specific use cases that needed to be handled because of the Meteor build process. So we get a new Xcode project each build. Every time you do a Meteor build, you get a new Xcode project. So there's that creates a couple problems with the schemes that Xcode generates, and a lot of the other tools require that either require storing stuff in your Xcode environment or project or directory, or having things that just exist in that directory. And so that's a hurdle to jump over. And then we found that using some of these other tools that it wasn't extremely easy to target both iOS and Android from the same code base, which is what Meteor, obviously that's why we chose Meteor, was so that we could target both of those OSs. And again, most don't play well with the new Xcode project. If you've never opened that Xcode project before, when you open it, it actually generates some schemes and does some other things behind the scenes. So that was an issue. So we built Launch to target Meteor specifically. And it's really easy to use. We went with just including a launch.json file in your project. And in that file, you're able to set up all the different environment variables, like API tokens and directories to Android SDKs and stuff like that. You can manage it all just from this one file. So this is an example of how you would get started using Launch. Obviously, it's available on NPM, so you would do the npm install -g Meteor Launch so that it's available globally. And then you can open your launch file and start filling out all of the different variables that you need for your specific project. So I'm not going to go through and explain all of these right now, but as you can see, we're covering a bunch of different scenarios, alerts in Slack. Here's the Android stuff. Here's things related to uploading to Hockey, and then Google Play and Galaxy. So there's that. So say you wanted to, like I was mentioning in the Launch Basic example, you wanted to build an Android app, and then you wanted to deploy the server to Galaxy and then upload the Android build to Hockey so that you can distribute it to testers or to your team or whoever. This is the process you would go about to add that to your project. First thing that we would need to do is generate a couple of keys. So this command will generate a key for signing your Android app. And then, so you can just run that command. And then the second thing we'll need to do is generate the Galaxy authorization file so that you can talk to the Galaxy servers without having to log in every time. So if you were doing this on a CI, you would want this type of file. And we're thinking about adding some different actions to Launch so that we could even automate this process for you. But in our documentation, all of the different variables that I showed you earlier, there's specific documentation on how you would get each one of those variables. So it just kind of, we're not automating this part of the process yet, but it does, there is a clear path to getting each one of these things. So the next thing you would need to do is go into your launch.json file and fill out all of these variables. So the name of the key that we just generated would be your Android key. And then your Android store pass would be the password for the key that you just generated. Then path to some Android SDK stuff, fill out your Hockey token and ID, and then so this is Galaxy deploy hostname. All that is the region of Galaxy that you want to deploy to. And then you just include the path to your Galaxy session file that we generated on the previous screen. And now you're ready to deploy all of these things. And doing that is simple. All you have to do is run launch Galaxy and then the name of your domain name, and then launch build, which will actually build the Android app that you're wanting to deploy, and then launch Hockey, and this will upload it to Hockey to the project you specified in the launch.json, and then it'll be available for whoever is on that project to download. So what else? As I mentioned before, we have actions for build and Galaxy and Hockey, but we also have an action for Testflight. So it will, to upload something to Testflight, and then an action for Play Store so that you can upload to the Google Play Store. So we're trying to run the gamut of all the types of places you might want to send your Cordova app. And we have a lot of ideas about more actions that we can add and more parts of this process that we can automate. So continuous delivery. This is why we really built this. Right now, with the Android example I just showed you, you could, if you set that up, you could run that locally on your machine, and that's great. I do that from time to time. But we really wanted to throw all of this on Travis or Circle CI or whatever, and have it be able to deploy just by either merging a pull request or doing a GitHub release. So we adding this to a continuous integration environment is really easy. Launch will run on both Linux and OS X environments, but you will need an OS X environment to build iOS. I don't see this changing anytime soon. It's unfortunate, but Apple does require an OS X environment. So I've been using Travis a good bit, and for making this work on Travis, Travis's command line tool has a really great way, excuse me, of encrypting files. So you can just run the Travis encrypt command for your launch.json file, and it will actually encrypt it and then add environment variables to your Travis project that will be used inside the Travis build to decrypt the file. So now that you have the encrypted file, you can actually commit that encrypted file to your GitHub repository, and then obviously making sure that you ignore the unencrypted file. But then on your Travis build, it will decrypt it, and then your launch.json with all of your credentials will be available for deploying to Hockey or to Testflight or wherever. In other CIs, you can actually just place the contents of the launch.json file in an environment variable, and then you could just echo it out to the file. It's not that hard to do. Another thing to note is all of our launch variables can easily be overridden by environment variables. So this is important, especially with the Android SDK, because on your system it may be in a different place than on the CI, or it might be a Linux environment on the CI, and so it gets installed in a different place. So that's pretty easy to do, either by using the Travis environment variables or by just exporting it in your travis.yaml file. So here's the config that we would use for Travis. If you wanted to do this Android to Galaxy, or excuse me, build an Android file, deploy it to Galaxy, and then upload it to Hockey. So it's very easy. This is just some caching stuff that makes running the build go a little bit faster after it's been cached. This is where the launch.json file actually gets decrypted. In this specific case, I've actually created a tarball locally that has the launch.json file in it, as well as some other files that we might need on the CI. So I do create that tarball and then encrypt the tarball and commit that to the repository. So this open.ssl file is using the environment variables that Travis created for me to decrypt that tarball. And then below it on line 13, you see it untars the file. And then we copy the key store. The key store is where Android stores the key that signs your app. And so we just copy that over to the home directory so that when you go sign the app on Travis, it'll know where that stuff is. So then obviously we just do the npm install Meteor launch. And it's pretty lightweight, so it doesn't take that long to do. And then we run our 3 commands: launch Galaxy, launch basic example.meteorapp.com. So that'll deploy our app. And then we do a launch build, which is going to actually build the Android app. And then launch Hockey, which is going to take the Android app, sign it, and align it, which just does some performance compression and stuff like that, and then upload it to Hockey so that then you can download it and distribute it however you see fit. So documentation, each one of these actions that I've told you about, and I mentioned before, we have documentation on each one of those actions and how to get each one of those environment variables. So that's available for you. And then, as I mentioned, it includes details about how to get all the variables. So you only have to do this stuff one time and then rely on launch to handle it for you in the future. And we have examples. I mentioned both the launch to-dos example and the launch basic example. Those are both up on GitHub with Travis files. So you can just go and copy how I did it. The launch to-dos example actually will build the app, deploy it to Galaxy, upload both iOS and Android versions to Hockey, and then upload the iOS version to Testflight, and then upload the Android version to the Google Play Store. And it does this using a Travis build matrix. So there's 4 different jobs that get run in the build that show you how to deploy to each one of those different places. Includes Travis builds. And the source code, we've open sourced this, and that's available. And all pull requests are welcome. We'd love if you guys have any feedback or things you might want to add or bug fixes. Obviously, all of that is welcome. So then, to show you kind of how this has helped us, because all this is great, but what are the results here? Our original goal was to ship 1 alpha build a week, and we've actually, using launch, we've been shipping multiple builds a day because we are just using a GitHub tag system, so that when we do a specific tag, then it alerts, obviously Travis is alerted, and it will just start building and deploying our app based on the tag name. So I don't spend any time deploying this stuff anymore. And now we've also accomplished our goal where anyone on our team can ship a build to alpha and beta environments through pull requests. We actually use the GitHub releases, GitHub tag system, but you could easily do this using pull requests as well. We did that for a while, where you'd have like an alpha branch and a beta branch and a production branch, and you just merge into that branch to deploy, and that's easy to do. We decided to go with the GitHub releases. We find that a little bit easier to manage. But another thing that's happened is our stakeholders are super happy. They get new features multiple times a day, and that's created a lot of trust with the people in our organization. So when we have issues that come up, and issues always come up in software, because who can estimate anything? But when those issues come up, they've seen our progress, and they understand. Okay, we understand why you're running into this issue, and take the time that you need. So that's been extremely helpful, because we've run into some issues. And I'm super happy, because going through that deploy process is awful. I hate doing it. And if I had to do it, the 3, 4, 5 times a day, I'd go insane, and it would take up my whole day. So that's not good. And okay, and if we ship 2 builds a day, we are saving over 5 hours a week, if that's based on the 30-minute build time. And I say over 5 hours because, as I mentioned before, things always go wrong when you're in that process, like forgetting how to do it. And so we're probably saving a good bit more than that, especially since anyone on our team can do it, and not everybody has to be educated about how to do it. So that's awesome. And it takes just a fraction of time to set a fraction of the it takes just a fraction of the time to set up launch. So you'd be saving 5 hours a week if you're shipping multiple builds a day. It took me about an hour to set up the launch basic project, which, just to remind you, will deploy to Galaxy and to Hockey. So it just took me like an hour to do that, and then now it just happens automatically. So we've been really stoked on that. Um, so this was where I was going to actually go back and show you the build that I was going to attempt to run. But since I didn't attempt to run it because that'd be risky given Travis's issues, I'm going to show you just if I can find it. Let's see, there we go. I'm going to show you a build that ran previously. So this was earlier today, about 4 hours ago. Only takes, between 7 and 9 minutes to run. And this is using the Travis config that I walked you through earlier as well. So you can see it goes through and does all of those actions. Let's see if I can make this text a little bit bigger. Decrypts the information for you, the launch.json file. Here it is installing Meteor launch. So I'll just break that open for you. And then it installs the Android SDK, and then exports that so it's available. And let's see what else. And then here it is deploying to Galaxy. So it just does launch Galaxy and then deploying to Galaxy, talking to the servers, blah, blah, blah. And then now version 10 is available in the US East. And you can just open that and see your app. And then here it is doing the launch build, which is actually building the Android app. So this is using the Meteor build behind the scenes, obviously, and then doing a couple other things to kind of prepare the Android app to be uploaded. So here's all the Android logs. And then let's get down here. The build was successful. And then here it is doing the launch to Hockey. So uploading the Android app to Hockey. So it signs the Android APK using the key that we generated. And then it does the alignment as well. And that's here. And then it's uploading to Hockey. And then right here, this is the response you get back from Hockey when it's successful. So that was successful. And let's see. When was this? Earlier today. And here is from earlier today, a build that was uploaded. And you could actually go to this public page here and download it. And today is the 14th, right? Yeah. Okay, good. I wasn't lying. So there it was, uploaded this morning. And let's see. Jump back into the presentation here. And that's it. So what I showed you was how to build and deploy a Meteor Cordova app using our launch tool, so that you can automate it and not think about it anymore. And I hope you do. All this stuff is available. I'm on GitHub as John the Pink, and basically everything else, Twitter, John the Pink. So if you have questions or need help, I'd love to help you do this. And also, if you want to check back in with this presentation, it's hosted on Surge, so you could open it up and look over it again if you need to. So thank you.
Awesome.
And now,
John.
brief word from our sponsors before you see the rest of the talk. Raygun. Spend more time building great software and less time fighting it. Raygun helps keep a watchful eye on your web and mobile applications and tells you when problems arise. You can learn more at raygun.com. NativeScript, backed by Telerik by Progress, is an open source framework for building truly native mobile apps with TypeScript and Angular 2. Use your web skills to get native UI and performance on iOS and Android. Enjoy the rest of the talk.
Really appreciate that talk.
No problem.
All right. So I actually had some questions. I queued up a bunch.
Sure.
I'm curious, like, I don't know if you've ever heard the story, but like GitHub has, as part of their automation, whenever they do a deploy, they track like the error rate after deploy. Are you guys doing anything like that? Like if the error rate goes too high, they'll like roll back the deploy and like notify the deployer that they broke the build somehow.
Right. We don't have any of that automated yet. We are using Sentry,
Okay.
which is a great service for tracking error rates on the client. We also have Hockey has a. Well, I don't think we will use this in production, but Hockey has a crash detection.
Okay.
So anytime that our builds are crashing on Android or iOS, we're getting alerts about that. So we'll figure out something different when we actually move into production. But yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah, I know there's a lot of options out there, and I saw that it's just hockeyapp.net. Is that the site?
I believe so. Yes, it is.
Okay. All right.
So they've been great for deploying our alpha releases. It works a lot faster than Testflight. If you've ever uploaded something to Testflight, it takes longer to upload, and it also it has to process the build, and then if you're wanting to, which can take, I've seen it take up to 45 minutes, which is just not acceptable if we're trying to move fast. And then I was going to mention one other thing. And then if you're trying to do external testing with Testflight, and you have to actually get it reviewed. They do the like beta app store review. So after you do that once, then the process is a little bit faster. But in practice, when we've sent stuff out through Testflight, it takes like 12 hours for them to approve it so that we can do external testing. So alphas we generally distribute internally. So using Hockey has been really great for that. It's so fast.
Nice. And I think some of us were just wondering where to find launch, which you did mention in your presentation. But if people are doing a search for it, it's just Meteor-launch.
Yes, it is Meteor-launch. I can paste that into the chat room.
Yeah, I already did that.
See. Oh, you did? Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
I wasn't looking. Yeah, it's Meteor-launch on GitHub, and then it's Meteor-launch on NPM as well.
Awesome. And, I'm kind of curious too, like, it's Meteor specific, but people could probably fork it and change it up for React Native or whatever they needed. Would you think?
Yeah, you could. If you were doing straight React Native, then I would suggest probably using Fastlane, which is a tool that we're using behind the scenes to do the iOS related actions. Fastlane is a great project. So if you are using React Native, I would highly suggest that. What Launch does is when it's using Fastlane, it's setting a bunch of different options that it kind of has defaults out of the box that work great for Meteor projects.
Okay. Cool. And that maybe leads into the next question, which is like, are you guys just using this for alpha and beta build releases, or are you actually like deploying the whole app start to finish production level like deployments as well using this process?
Well, our app isn't in production yet, but we will use it. Yes. And so on Google Play, you can actually deploy straight to production if you wanted to. And that's something that we're thinking about doing. On the kind of iTunes side, when you're using Testflight, it's actually, if you have a build uploaded to Testflight and you're testing it externally, you can promote that build. And there's probably something similar in the Google Play Store as well. I haven't messed around with it as much, but we'll probably go that route instead on the iOS side, is just promoting the build we already been testing.
Yeah. Interesting. And will you just you mentioned like tagging and releases, will you just like keep master like deployable, like that version is always deployable, and then like do your work in branches or something like that? Is that what you're envisioning once you get to production?
Yeah, we are doing that. And then the way that we're doing releases right now is we have a naming convention that we've kind of set up in our READMEs for deploying. So when we have a version that we want to like send to our alpha environment, all you have to do is name it, app/alpha/ and then the build number or version.
Yeah.
And that's what Travis is using to know where to deploy it. So if it finds alpha, then it's going to deploy to our hockey setup. And if it finds beta, then it's going to deploy to Testflight and to the Google Play Store to use their beta setup.
I see. All right.
We found that that's cleaner than trying to maintain different branches that deploy to different places. But that works as well too.
Yeah. So Steve had a question. There are 2 iOS app settings for export compliance that need to be set in info.plist file when submitting to the App Store, which I've not figured out how to do using mobile config or config.xml. Can Launch automate setting these, or is there another way to automate setting these? And he actually mentions the 2 settings.
I haven't run into this specific issue. The way that we're doing the build, and maybe this, I did run into some issues using beta versions of Meteor where it wasn't setting the right, it wasn't generating the plist correctly, and so you'd have to go into Xcode and set them manually. But with the latest version of Meteor, we're not having to change anything in the configs. We're just having to download either the ad hoc certificate or the distribution certificate, and then apply it using the provisioning profiles, and then upload it. And there's no plist or config that you have to change. So if that's an issue for you, Steve, maybe I'm not sure. I could look into it.
Yeah, I would say like it'd probably be helpful, Steve, to know like what version of Meteor you're on. I know with 1.3 they just updated the entire Cordova build process, so perhaps that would fix the problem. I don't know.
Yeah, I haven't run into issues in a while with having to manually set the Xcode project, set anything in the Xcode project.
Yeah. Which, I mean, he's right. Like once you have to do that, that's kind of a pain because every time
defeats the whole purpose.
Yeah. I guess you could like automate just inserting those settings into the plist file, but yeah.
It is possible. And when we first were building this out, I was actually accounting for a specific attribute that needed to be set. And that's easy to do using, there's an Xcode npm package that will go into your Cordova build and set whatever you want. So maybe that's something we could add in the future, is defining specific variables that you need to have set.
All right. So I had another question. Like we've been talking about continuous deployment. I'm kind of wondering, like, are you guys doing any kind of testing, like integration testing, and are you building that into your Travis process at all? And even if it's not something you do now, is it something on your horizon?
The answer to that is yes and no. We're testing certain parts of our project. We have a shared code library that is all written in TypeScript and tested. A lot of it is tested. It's not fully tested. So we are running those tests. Some of the other parts of the app are untested, and we don't like that. But we'll hopefully fix that soon.
Yeah. Awesome. And then you also mentioned that you guys are using GraphQL.
Yes.
I'm kind of curious. Can you talk a little bit more about that and like how you're utilizing that?
Absolutely. So at New Spring, we have a bunch of legacy systems, or legacy is kind of a demeaning term. We have a bunch of systems that were in place prior to building this app. So one of them is has all of our people data, and it's a .NET stack. So it has everything that we know about our users in it. Then we have an expression engine site, which powers our actual main site, and it has all of our content in it, like articles, stories, videos, So that's another part of it. Then we have Mongo, which is where we're doing, Meteor specific stuff, and stuff that only needs to be tracked in the app. And then we have some external services like Google Site Search and other external APIs. So in order to build this app, we needed to be able to access all of that data, and GraphQL was a really great way to do that. And so if you're not familiar with GraphQL, GraphQL is a server that sits kind of in between all of your data stores and the thing that needs to access those data stores, and provides a uniform way for accessing that data. So as an app developer, I don't have to know how to access the .NET or the SQL Server database or how any of that stuff is mapped. I just have to call the specific GraphQL query that we've set up. So if you have kind of a similar situation like that, where you want to build kind of a newer app, and you need to be able to access some data that is not easily accessible, then check out GraphQL. It's been really great for us.
Yeah, I would imagine like I worked at GoDaddy for a little while on a project called Outright, and like they were using Backbone and they were using Titanium at the time, but we were working to switch to native iOS. And like I was heading up the project to clean up the API because the Backbone team had just kind of like parked little API JSON calls, like wherever they needed them, they would just kind of like make one and make it work. And there was no like documentation or consistency. And then as we started to do the iOS app, like that became a problem because like we maybe needed something slightly different for iOS than what the Backbone team needed. And so like we always had to like have meetings and get both teams to sit down and talk about it. And I think GraphQL would be a great way to solve that kind of issue, because like no one needs to know, like they just need to know like, oh hey, I'm going to query for this kind of data, and as long as we support it, like we can do whatever we want on the back end. So I'm kind of excited about GraphQL myself too.
Yeah.
All right. That looks like all the questions we had. So thank you, John. Really appreciate you giving the talk today and open sourcing that tool. That's really awesome. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, guys, for listening. And if you have any questions, I'm available.
All right. Awesome. So we'll just take like 15-minute break, 13-minute break, and then we'll be back to hear Lauren talk about the challenges of Cordova. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for watching this CraterConf talk from the Mobile Edition 2016. For more information about upcoming conferences such as the one in February 2017, go to conf.crater.io to learn more.